Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the webinar series that we host here at the Center for Professional Selling at Ball State University. I'm your host. My name is Deva Rangarajan. I'm the director of the sales center out here. And today, for the first time in a long time, we actually have a marketer in a sales podcast. So essentially, it's my pleasure to have Darryl Praill, who is a chief marketing officer of a company that does help salespeople. So he is the chief marketing officer of a company called VanillaSoft, which is a company that helps SDRs and all the sales organizations have a better sales cadence. It's a sales engagement platform company, but I'm sure that they do much more than that. So Darryl, thank you so much for taking time off a busy schedule to come and talk to our audience.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm thinking I should put you in my marketing team. You just nailed the positioning. Well done.
Well, that's one of the things. It's one of the things where we talk about is that from a faculty perspective, what you realize is that salespeople need to be much more strategic in their thinking. And actually, it was very interesting because early in my career in teaching, I was actually talking to a person who works in the CPG space, the consumer packaged goods space. And he was working for a company called Unilever. And he was talking about the fact that how he was a lifelong marketer, and he said, if I need to be out there and be a country head, I need to have sales experience. And he said something that's what he said is within their organization, they said they needed every marketeer to think like a salesperson, and they wanted every salesperson to also think strategically rather than win customers immediately. You need to think strategically like a marketer. So I think that in today's day and age, your salespeople need to be thinking like marketers. And I think
I agree with you. And what's funny about what you said, though, is this. So your colleague made a comment that, for him to be a country manager, he needed the sales experience. How many times has the question been stated, for me to be a country manager, I need to have marketing experience? Never. Indeed. Even though they want them to think like a marketer.
Absolutely. And that's something that you see. So where you see that happening, at least a little bit more in my experience, is not in many of the industrial spaces where even the marketing and sales is relegated, where in my experience, if you take a look at industrial organizations, for them is if you're not good enough to be in production and R&D, maybe you can go to marketing and sales. I'm joking.
So no, but that's actually really true.
Indeed.
I can't fit anywhere else, so I might as well go in sales or I might as well go in marketing. It's the career of last option, last choice, because Absolutely. I can't figure it out.
Indeed. And in those kind of organizations, the idea is that, or even in CPG, in consumer packaged goods, if you're working for Procter & Gamble and Unilever, I'm sure the thought within that is the marketers are responsible for the billion-dollar brands. It's the job of the salespeople not to mess it up.
Yeah.
But most of the time, I really think the only place where marketing gets the strategic focus it should be getting is in the consumer packaged goods and the Procter & Gambles and the Unilevers of the world. And I personally think that all the industrial companies and the tech organizations for once in a while should get their heads out of the places where the sun does not shine and start thinking about marketing as being strategic. And you should not be one of those organizations where you start saying, you know what, my market is, I'm not doing so well in terms of sales. So what's the first budget I'm going to cut? I'm going to cut marketing budget. I don't think that should be the case. And I am a hardcore sales faculty, but I think that the way things are progressing, marketing will play an immense role in making sure that the salespeople can have a better quality life, can be smart in their outreach, can be much better in what they do, can shorten their sales cycle times. And I hate to do this, but I'm talking more. I need to be interviewing you, but these are my thoughts on what I really think where marketing has to play a very important role, will play a role, will only continue to grow as we progress in B2B spaces.
So there's so many places I can go with this conversation. Just to quickly respond, marketing has never been more significant, more visible, and more strategic in the history of organizations than it is at this date and this time and this day and age. It's shifted dramatically and it's continuing to shift. And there's a lot of things that have influenced that, which I can go into if you want to understand that, but it's really straightforward. But the funny part, I want to touch briefly on your point about, what's the first thing that gets cut? It's marketing. Or, for us to have a country manager or a CEO or a managing director, they often come from the sales side. And when I see that, I'll tell anybody who asks me, I don't hide behind this. I share it with my colleagues. I share it with my team. That, to me, is a glaring sign that the leadership of the company simply does not
Yeah.
understand marketing. Now, the irony of that is that doesn't mean they understand sales. It simply means sales brings in revenue and I need revenue, therefore I can't cut sales, right? That's the logic.
Absolutely.
But I don't know what marketing does because I myself have never taken the time to understand the role they play, the impact they make. I'm not holding them accountable for deliverables. I'm not holding them accountable for key performance indicators and metrics. Therefore, I don't get it.
Indeed.
And that's a failure in leadership that is pervasive. It's changing, but it's pervasive.
Indeed. Darryl, can I actually even go to the extent of even building on what you just said? I really think the problem with marketing is not a problem. The problem with many people is that everybody thinks they're marketeers. I personally think is the reason why they don't think about all these aspects is they think marketing is all about hand waving, is about coming up with something creative without being held accountable. All the things that you said. But if you take a look at it, everybody thinks they're a marketeer. Everybody thinks marketing is easy. And when that thought prevails, that's pretty much where, in my opinion, they don't think of it as being strategic enough. That is my opinion, that everybody is a marketer. I don't need to have a degree for it. And you don't need to think about it strategically. It's a creative process that does not have a structured cadence, even to marketing. So cadence, it's not just in sales, it's also in marketing. And in my opinion, when that happens, I really think that marketing does not get the credit it is due. By the way, for the longest time, that's also with sales. It's not that just because they bring sales in and sales is important, that all of these CEOs who have never been in sales themselves respect it. So that's another thing, of course. If my CEO is in sales, that's what they know.
That's what they know, and that's what they value, and that's what they advocate.
Indeed.
So let me give you an example that your audience might be able to relate to, and I think this is a really powerful example. So my wife is an interior designer.
Yeah.
So let's equate interior design to marketing. They both produce visual, creative outcomes, right? They both create an emotional response and reaction.
Indeed.
Now, my wife's lament about interior design is that everybody's watching home and garden television or DIY TV,
Yeah.
and they say, well, I can pick colors. I dress well. I know what color goes over what color. I'm a snazzy dresser. I can be an interior designer. My wife more and more gets called into situations where these are $1 million, $2 million, $3 million homes, and the builders are saying, we need you to save the project because the homeowner did the design because they thought they could do it, and it's a fiasco. And instead of taking ownership and responsibility themselves, they're blaming us. And the reason is really simple. My wife doesn't go in and say, what's your favorite color? You know, what's your design style? She'll go in, say for an example, and this is kind of a marketing metaphor. She'll go into a kitchen and she'll say, you know, are you a cook? Are you right-handed? Are you left-handed? Do your kids get involved? Do the kids do dishes? How tall are all the people in the household? When you get up in the morning, do you have cereal? Do you have breakfast? Do you have bacon and eggs? Do you have a smoothie? Oh, you have a smoothie. Okay, so where are the ingredients? So where should the dishwasher be relevant to the sink? And I could go on and on and on.
Indeed.
In other words, it's not about the pretty colors, which is what everybody thinks marketing is. It's about understanding user or buyer behaviors and how that affects the end result, the outcome. The pretty colors are just the surface.
Indeed. And I think we are on the same page out here. And I really think I love your example of what you're talking about. And I'm sure that every person in every discipline where things have been taken over, everything is do it yourself, people think they can do this. But
Yeah.
I think the fact is that no matter what, is that on the contrary, what I really think is that eventually there's going to come a point where there is going to be need for experts in, because they just can't deal with this all this. Because in my opinion, that's also one of the things that has happened since you had the wonderful Challenger sale. Again, you and I can go back.
Yeah.
But for me, the one good thing that it has done, I mean, it's done many good things as well. But for me, the one thing it has done is that it's opened up the concept of how should I get in front of my customers before, and not just think of it in terms of face-to-face, but how can I actually leverage my marketing prowess. But if I have to do that, how should I make sure that the content that I get for the customer who's not going to be having a salesperson explain it to them, how should I make the content correct? How can I present it to the right kind of people at the right time, at the right place? And it has actually forced this, and the relevance of marketing has come more into the forefront. And that for me is one of the nicer things that has happened because of the concept of the challenger sale from a sales perspective, right? And what's happened, of course, is that it has also meant good things for the sales organization as well, because when I have 4 suppliers, and I hate to bring this in this, so if I'm looking at outreach, if I'm looking at VanillaSoft, I'm looking
Sure.
at PeopleSoft, right? I'm
Yep.
looking at 3, and all of them have a wonderful CMO, not as good as Darryl, of course,
Of course.
and then all of them are sending me the kind of right curated content, having done the research on what kind of a buyer, what am I looking for. And then at some point in time, I am not an expert on sales cadence. What's going to happen is that, yes, it prepares me for it, but it does not tell me in terms, unless your marketing positioning is so strong that say I have to choose VanillaSoft over the others, it still is a great tool for actually more qualified lead generation. Because a customer, where you go in, a customer is going to ask more pointed questions to a salesperson. And I really think it's going to have a big impact on a salesperson also being effective. So I really think that this concept of whatever the challenger sale book has triggered in terms of marketing responses to it. And if you take a look at marketing budgets, I don't have to tell you about it. Year after year, I take a look at B2B marketing budget spend, and it just keeps going up. And of course, and that's something we'll come back eventually, is to take a look at what are the metrics for it. If the marketing spend is going up, if it's not done carefully, we could even run the risk of saying, okay, where is the return on investment, which if an organization is not necessarily looking at marketing strategically, will not be in a position to understand what are the metrics to say whether all the spend that we have on marketing, is it helping us or not. And even that, from that perspective, I think you also need to start thinking in terms of marketing, and ROI in marketing could also be linked to shortage of sales cycle times. But that comes from a clear understanding of marketing and sales alignment, where I can say for every effort that I put into marketing, it is actually helping my sales person in different stages of the sales process. That for me, again, in my head, it is very clear, but talking to you, I'm able to articulate it in my perspective in a way that I think it makes a lot of sense as well. So for me.
So there's a lot you've just gone through there. So remind me if I forget to talk about things like alignment, the role of sales versus the role of marketing. Let's talk about things like trust. So let's back up the horses a little bit. Here's the irony. Sales and marketing have the distinction, the separation line between the two groups is overlapping more and more, and it's getting more and more blurred. So for example, it used to be that the sales organization, they would have a sales development rep who would initially qualify a prospect and set up an appointment to talk to an account executive who would then go through and sales qualify it, if you will, and make sure that it's an opportunity and add it to forecast or not. So but the reality is that SDR role, which is really just doing the sales qualification process, is more and more moving out of the sales team and into the marketing team now. Last I saw, 1 in 3, revenue organizations have the SDR team in the marketing. So the question is why? Sales reps will say, oh my God, this is sacrilege. Okay, I get that. But the actual SDR isn't doing any discovery.
Absolutely.
Right? They're not doing the challenger sale. They're simply sitting there going, do you have a problem? Do you have budget? Would you like to talk to an expert? I can make that happen. That's a very short and sweet version, but that's what they're doing. That doesn't necessarily take sales skills per se. It's qualification skills. Well, what does marketing do? Marketing, through lead nurtures and lead scoring and lead grading, ultimately produces a marketing qualified lead. So what's the commonality between a marketing qualified lead that marketing owns and a sales qualified lead that your SDR function, outputs, is the word qualification.
Yeah.
So the qualification stage is more and more going into marketing. Now, the next thing that's really interesting about these two groups is, sales is all out there fundamentally to sell, but more and more and more, the lead split between inbound marketing generated and outbound sales is sourced and sales targeted and sales developed is dramatically split, like, 70-30 inbound, 80-20 inbound. All right. So the significance of marketing to feed that funnel, that sales pipeline, is getting more and more paramount. And sales is doing less and less of their own development.
Indeed.
That's the next thing, right? So now look at this. Who do we go to define our target personas? Who do we go to define our ideal customer profile? It's not the sales team. It's the marketing team. So nowhere along the way here have I talked about pretty colors and wonderful logos. I've talked about understanding your buyer. I'm talking about understanding their pain points. And this is what people forget, is that more and more and more and more and more, marketing knows the prospective buyer better than the sales folks do, because we have to reach them omni-channel, phone, email, social media. We have to use various tactics: search engine marketing, trade shows, social proof like review sites. So we're having to live across all the venues and places that they live in, so we can then hand it off to sales, who is singularly focused on qualifying, discovering, and then fundamentally solving, putting a proposal forward that will meet the problems. So there's a reason why sales is now either halfway through the sales funnel or even 2/3 of the way the sales funnel. Marketing is more and more owning the lion's share of that funnel. Now, one thing that you talked about quickly, you didn't use it, but I will. You didn't use the word trust, even though everything you said was about trust. So you said, I could be looking at outreach. I could be looking at VanillaSoft. And they're all engaging CMOs, and they seem to have their act together, and everybody's talking about them, and their websites look cool. So it's a matter of marketing's job in many regards is to establish trust and to remove a reason from the prospective buyer to discount you, to rule you out, to eliminate you. Because every buyer is looking to mitigate risk. And so they're looking for a reason to say, you're not qualified. You scare me. I'm not convinced. So marketing has got to get in the head of these people. And the challenge is, we're human and we're all different. And one's a visual learner, and one loves reading, and one loves audible, right? So podcasts, white papers, videos. And then, some people are reserved, they're introverts, others are extroverts. So we've got to have content that appeals to all of our audiences, and we have to live where they live, and we have to be engaged.
Indeed.
And that is the big challenge with marketing, but that's also what makes it so freaking exciting, because there's just so many opportunities. You can specialize. There's so many pieces on the proverbial chessboard that you have as a marketer that you can move to win the game. It's never been a better time to have this job.
Indeed. And I would like to really add on this, because you hit the nail on the head on a lot of things. So one of the things which you talked about trust. I didn't specifically talk about trust because in my head, if I take a look at outreach, or if I take a look at VanillaSoft and everything else, there is trust at two levels. One is the trust in the case of an unknown is, hey, is this person or is this organization trustworthy? Usually when I talk about value creation and value proposition, something, why should you buy from us over the competition? And usually I talk about how the role of marketing is increasingly in risk mitigation, right? You talked about risk mitigation. And if you are there, in especially the more you're well known, and usually what we say is that your brand is your biggest risk mitigator. That is, if you have a brand, what it means is that you have a history of being around for a lot of time, making promises. I mean, hopefully it's a good brand. You know what I mean? It's not a brand.
Yeah, it's the classic. You never got fired for buying IBM or for buying Microsoft. It's a good brand.
I love the fact, because that's what I teach in my class. I talk about the importance of brand in B2B settings, right? Because it's a risk mitigator. And in my opinion, in the tech space, it's more important than ever, because you're asking customers which have used to traditional ways of buying, traditional ways of selling, traditional ways of doing their things, and you're asking them to change the way they normally used to work. So
that's scary.
That's scary, absolutely, which means that, are you trustworthy? And there the brand comes in at two levels. In my opinion, you have a brand that is what you stand for as a company, but also how the SDR or the AEs or the field sales reps
Yes.
present the brand. And that for me is where you have trust at two levels, and people forget the risk mitigation part and the role marketing plays in that. And the second thing is how marketing, by enabling the salesperson to have the right kind of conversation in whatever channel, is reiterating the message that says this is what we are as a brand. So you're actually helping build the brand of that particular salesperson as well, so that he or she can kind of build. Because at the end of the day is that once they've gone past should I talk to you, you as a salesperson, either on the phone or on our emails, embody the brand, embody the fact that when I'm interacting with you, do I get the feeling that you know what you're talking about, you know what is relevant to me, and more importantly, will you make sure that you don't mess it up once you come with me? So that for me is, I love that you talk about all this, because this is exactly one of the things that we say. And usually I say my solution to a customer is a combination of my product, which in your case would be your sales engagement platform.
Yep.
The level of customization is the value added service. The last one is the trust that they have to place with VanillaSoft. Because
So let's explore that for a second, because I'm gonna agree with everything you just said, and I'll circle back on that. But I'm gonna start with I'm gonna add one element. You said there was the trust I have in the brand, VanillaSoft, and then the experience I have, when I talk to the brand, that sales development rep, right? And is it consistent? So we'll talk to me. That's the whole customer experience, CX. There's a reason customer experience is huge. Notice it's not sales or marketing; it's customer experience, and that starts from cradle to grave.
Yeah.
And everybody has an obligation to ensure that, although marketing often is the one who owns and is accountable for it. I will go one step further, though. You said there was the brand as well as the sales rep. There's one more element. I think there are brand ambassadors. And in fact, I know this to be the case. So let me give you an example of that. I'll use VanillaSoft, but there's others. So people like, or they trust, or they respect, the VanillaSoft brand, but they know if I go to, say, LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook, that it's a corporate brand. Whilst I may like their content and their education and their messaging, it's a faceless, nameless individual that could be different today than it was tomorrow. And therefore, there's still an element of hesitation and mistrust, because I don't know who the individual is behind there. Companies who are successful also have brand ambassadors. Often that's a CEO, could be a CMO. So for example, in my case, I am really active as Darryl Praill, who coincidentally is with VanillaSoft, on social, on public speaking, on podcasts, on everywhere else. And people will connect with me as an individual way more personally, way more emotionally. They will connect with me far deeper than they will a corporate brand. But now, when you bring the personal brand ambassador, Darryl Praill, with the company brand, VanillaSoft, together, that does a huge job of influencing their perception and their trust in you. Because if things go wrong, if I have a bad experience with that sales rep, what do they know they can do? They know they can go back to Darryl.
Yeah.
I know Darryl. Darryl, your sales rep sucked. They did me wrong. So that's their backup plan, because they feel that they have that relationship with me, even though we may never have talked. So that's the big thing. But
absolutely.
Going back, customer experience, huge. I tell everybody who will listen, the customer experience starts with the first time they hear anything about, or see or consume anything about the company brand, whether that be a trade show, a white paper, a search engine marketing ad, a Facebook post, an ebook, a case study, a video, a podcast. That's where it starts, and it builds and it accumulates and it aggregates, and you're building that trust. That's what you're doing. So if the sales rep is saying the wrong verbiage, the wrong words, they're giving the wrong solutions, and it's inconsistent from what marketing has educated the prospect on, now there is a disconnect. And now the prospect is going, wait a minute, I went into this thinking I liked all these things, but the sales rep didn't talk about those things. They talked about these things.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to do. So now I'm going to pull back because it's indecision, because now I don't know if I thought I trusted you, but now I don't trust you.
Indeed. And I love what you just said, because in my head, always the brand ambassador, again, not always, but brand ambassador could also be the salesperson themselves.
They absolutely are.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And I also like, because we actually have a paper. So one part of what I have to do is that I have to write papers. We have a paper exactly on brand ambassadors. And we especially talk about the fact that when you have brand ambassadors, the question as a VanillaSoft is that when does the brand ambassador's brand become bigger?
Absolutely.
Indeed. And that's interesting from that viewpoint. And that's for any marketer at that point in time is saying that we want to put somebody as a face of the brand. And of course, I'm not going to focus on the negative aspects of it. If Darryl says something that is not politically correct or something, you also take the fall with it. But of course,
the company does too.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about it. But I'm more talking about the fact that it's inevitably bound to happen, that the amount of followers that a brand member you're going to have is going to be probably much more than what VanillaSoft is going to have. And at what point in time is it going to be something where the brand ambassador now has to be held accountable for, not he or she, but more along the lines of at what point is that actually helping you, or in the viewpoint of actually distracting from the message that you want to bring. And I think that's a topic another day that I think we should definitely talk. And I think the more I talk with you, Darryl, I think one conversation is not going to be enough, because I think we are talking about a lot of things which I absolutely love. But let me come back to one of these things, Darryl, because what I'm really curious is to hear your opinions on certain things as well. Huh? So you talked about this. You talked about in terms of marketing can help drive sales. You talk about how it can deliver a great customer experience. But if I want to concretely talk about how can marketing create value for a firm,
okay,
can you kind of articulate it in 5 or 6 points?
Marketing sucks. It creates no value. Just kidding. Just messing with you. Just seeing if you're paying attention.
Yeah.
Okay, so how can marketing create value for a firm? So there's lots of ways you can do that, right? And every firm is a little bit different. So that's the first thing you kind of got to, for me, I'll use me as a case study. When I started in September of 2017 at VanillaSoft, the first thing I did was I did an inventory of the firm's assets. And by that, I don't mean did they have computers. I meant, did they have brand equity? Did they have awareness? Did they have unique differentiation from the other vendors out there? As well as their weaknesses. Same concept, where are we losing? Where are we weak? What do we need to shore up? So, right away, the first thing marketing can do is shore up some of those weaknesses. In the case of VanillaSoft, they had been very product-centric. They had a killer product. They had through-the-roof customer satisfaction. It was a dream scenario for a marketer to walk into because no one knew who they were, right? So a marketer or good marketing can do a number of actual value props that are huge. They build brand awareness. What they'll often do is they'll unite the organization on the ideal customer profile and the personas and the messaging, right? So I'll give you an example. I sat around early on with all the leaders of the various groups, and we simply sat in a room, and I said, we're going to go through some personas, and we're going to figure our ICP, and we're going to figure out our unique value proposition. So open-ended question, who's our target customer? And we went around the room. Brilliant exercise, because going into that meeting, they all thought they were in alignment. And when we went around and individually said, who's our target customer and why would they ever buy us? We had not one single answer the same. And everybody looked at each other going, really? That's what you think? No, really? That's what you're selling? So marketing, owning the message, owning the brand is great for getting alignment and consistent. That reflects back in customer experience. That's the big thing right there. The other thing is marketing is, I like to believe, the truth seeker. It's up to marketing to go and seek out, why don't you like us? And that includes not just individuals, that includes industry analysts, that includes industry influencers, which are different from analysts, right? So industry influencers are people like, big people who have hundreds of thousands of followers on LinkedIn or whatever else, who actually persuade and move public sentiment. All right. Sales isn't worried about those. So those people, I'm chasing leads. I'm not worrying about those people. So marketing has a huge opportunity to actually influence public perception and bring that back into the product roadmap or the service offering or the culture or the messaging or the differentiation. When marketing does that, they quickly determine where the fit is. So then they actually get sales and the R&D focus on developing a product that meets their ideal customer profile, right? But before, they have been often just reacting opportunistically. Customer A wants us to add this feature. They're a big customer. We're going to do it. No, it's okay for us to say no. And this is why. That's out of scope.
Yeah.
That is not where we want to be. So there's so many ways marketing can do it. But for me, the biggest impact marketing can have is kind of like in multiple points. One, build the brand and awareness because that starts the trust process. Two, build the lead development process through inbound tactics because that feeds the machine. Three, ensure that there is a consistent customer experience from end to end because that reduces churn and increases the opportunity to actually farm that install base and expand the footprint. All right. So those are three areas right there that have an immediate, tangible impact on the company. But the fourth one we haven't even talked about, and this is huge. This is the reason why marketing is more and more and more viewed as the strategic person at that executive table above and beyond the CEO. Infrastructure. Your whole operation runs on a tech stack. That's where you get your information from. That's where you make your decisions from. That's where you know to invest your human resources because you can see where you're weak, you're not responding. That tech stack is often the domain of marketing. Marketing has the program budget and marketing has the operations staff. And because of that, marketing wields the influence to make sure it all comes together, making themselves indispensable and also making themselves the leader behind the vision and the direction. Now, yes, I'm a CMO and it's going to sound like I'm biased and there's going to be lots of people out there disagreeing with me. But those are the areas that marketing has a substantial influence and a role to play in a company today.
Fantastic. And here is where I want to add to what you said, because where I think people, hopefully when they disagree, they do not disagree just by principle, but actually based on arguments that they think is relevant. Because for me, when you articulated very well, you talked about the tech stack and everything else, because the way I look at it increasingly is building brand awareness, understanding the right persona, all of that is fantastic. But the key to all this is the last part in terms of the tech stack, because we need to start asking ourselves in today's day and age. And this is not just for, because the tendency for people who will be listening to this conversation is that, he works for VanillaSoft, that's a tech company. But I think people should go beyond that to actually understand that for any kind of organization, what you're saying holds true. If I don't have a good brand, you don't have to be in a tech space. You can be in any kind of space. You need to have a good brand to be able to sell. You need to understand that you need to be addressing different people and different personas, and you need to bring different kind of content in different formats. That's what I like. But the tech stack is where I really think you hit the nail on the head, because in very simple terms, when I teach a class called sales technology, and I try to illustrate a point saying the content that I use on my websites, on my blogs, is the same content, but maybe in a different format when I feed it to my salespeople in my sales enablement platform.
Yes.
And so if I have the right tech, if I have the right infrastructure, if I know what is the right content there, I can use the same content, of course, in different formats. I can bring my story in a blog, in Instagram, in stuff like that. But the consistency is where marketing should really play a key role in ensuring that the salespeople use the collateral that has been created with the explicit idea of making the right promise to the customer about what they should experience. But of course, along the way, what does it mean to every member in the customer's decision-making unit as when the salesperson talks to them in the concept of sales enablement? And of course, in terms of account-based marketing, it's the same kind of content saying, I can again go in and say, for very specific accounts, the same content that I've created, I can create it for you. And then the later on, which is what I really think is something that is increasingly going to happen a lot more, is the concept of customer success, and how customer success has to be coherent in terms of understanding the customer experience and going back and saying, this is what we promised at the beginning. This is what our salespeople promised when they came and sold it to you. And this is what we're doing out there to ensure that we're delivering that value in line so that the customer feels that overall the experience in terms of the ease of doing business with you is, as a marketing point of view, you have prepared them for the complete process, all the way from setting the right expectations to the point of taking them and engaging them with them in every different step along the way, to the point finally even educating the customer about this is what you paid for and this is what you got. In my opinion, that is where truly marketing can help in terms of creating that messaging by interacting with everybody within the customer facing roles. It could be sales, it could be customer success, customer service. And then of course, I think what you also said was a tech stack in terms of saying, am I going to use Slack? Am I going to use Teams? To that point in time. So essentially, I'm just breaking up what was so clear in your head so that my audience knows in terms of sales, inbound marketing, in terms of the demand waterfall, in terms of sales enablement, in terms of CRM and customer success. Because at the end of the day, that is what we break it down into, right? Unfortunately, we break it down into silos. But if that is the case, if a true marketing is when you actually combine all of them together and have a very coherent view, which of course is if you have a very visionary CMO, that really helps. But unfortunately, in most organizations, I'm sure that's a struggle as well for CMOs who come in and realize that sometimes they don't have a complete vision on what and where their organization is going as well. Huh?
So it's a combination. Sometimes the CMO is not visionary, or sometimes they are visionary, but the CEO or the COO or the CFO are not, and will not empower them or give them the budget, because you got to spend money to make money, right? And so, I know when I look at jobs, I've been an employee numerous times, a CMO, a VP sales, a VP marketing, and I've had my own agency for years and years and years. And so even whether I was taking on clients at my agency or taking on, a job with an employer, that was a big part of my due diligence, was to make sure they themselves, the company leadership, had not only a vision and understand the roles and responsibility of each of the players on the team, including marketing, including sales, but also were willing to invest the money. You talked about, marketing spend going up year and year and year. Yes and no. I think Harvard might say the average, marketing investment should be 3%. All right. And that was a wonderful number 20 years ago, but it ain't 3%. And I see now, many it's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12%. And yet I see so many organizations, like so many, that are still 1.5%, 1%. Right. So that's your first warning flag. If the company gets it or not, are they willing to spend? One of the things that's really interesting is the tech stack conversation. What you do, you make a fundamental promise to your future customers, join us, and this is the benefits you'll gain, and this is the experience you'll have. And if you don't deliver on that promise, because it's a deal, they're saying, I'll give you money and you give me that promise. If you don't deliver on that, they leave. Churn. Real simple. So the whole point of the stack is making sure that you as an organization, and marketing often is the champion of this, are creating the processes across all the various teams. Again, customer experience. That's how we began this whole process. So for marketing, it's marketing automation. The process is going to be in that. For the SDR team, it's going to be sales engagement, and outreach, VanillaSoft, a sales loft. Then for the account exec, it's going to be, okay, now we're chasing them and closing the deal. That's CRM. All right, so now we're going to onboard them. Well, that might be another tool, right? And I'm going to make sure they're doing there's no warning signs anywhere along the way as they use my tools and services. A churn 0. All right. And if they do call in, I want to give them a delightful experience for support. Zendesk. All right. So are all these tools talking to each other? Is that process being mirrored across the board? Are you measuring this? Are you actually trending it and seeing where you're succeeding or losing? Often it's going to be your CEO or your COO or your CMO who are looking at that, because they're the ones tasked with delivering that customer experience. The stack is what executes upon the defined processes, and the defined processes reflect the vision that marketing is out there espousing.
Absolutely.
So, the stack is huge.
And I think that's exactly what I really like about what you said, is that the tech part aside, saying what tool I'm going to use, that's it. It's the vision of saying what promise are we going to make to the customer. But I think you said something which I think is also very important, is that promise made to the customer should be aligned with different people within your own organization as well.
Yeah.
For me, that is what I think one of the things which is, and I think that's, maybe you do so much on a daily basis that sometimes people tend to forget, is that part of about not just communicating value to the customer, but also making sure that you align your internal communication and bust silos across your organization, so that the sales handoff with the customer success, the sales handoff with service, customer service, whatever it is smooth or happens in a way that everybody's aware of it. Because that's sometimes we tend to forget, because I really think that if marketing can map out the customer journey and then map out those customer journeys into linking it to our internal processes, and then start helping each player that is interacting with the customer to ensure that they bring the same consistent message and delivery, I really think that your churn zero is going to be okay. I'm not saying churn zero as a company, but
Sure.
your churn is going to be zero. And I think that is where I really think that, in my opinion as well, is that for CMOs, it's very obvious, but I think for my audience, it's critical. It's not just about making promise to your customers. It's also helping the rest of your organization keep that promise, make the right promise, and deliver that promise, and explain to the customer when they have delivered on that promise. So, which brings me,
go ahead. No, I say it goes full circle. I mean, just a sidebar, and then I'll hand it back to you. A part of my compensation as the CMO is revenue, whether and that's a split between new business and recurring business, right? So what does that say? Because I don't control the sale. I feed sales the lead, and I can influence sales, but I don't control their ability to close business. Nor do I control, my customer success team or my support team, the ability to do their job. But because it's part of my compensation, you know what I'm doing? I'm sticking my nose in there to say what's going on.
Indeed. And I love this, which actually was my last question. You hit the nail on there. Is, Darryl, if I'm not talking about you as a CMO, but if you can just take a step back and talk about all marketing departments in many B2B organizations. I'm not going to talk about B2C kind of stuff. So what do you think should be metrics? I'm not going to ask you about metrics that their organization is going to hold them against. It's going to be unrealistic. But in your opinion, if you had power over all the CEOs in the world, what do you think would be the metrics that marketing should be held up against and be held accountable for?
All right, so this can be a contentious conversation, right? Every marketer is going.
Yeah, but I want to have your.
No one wants to be held accountable, right? Metrics mean that you're measuring me, and no one wants that.
Yeah.
So this is Darryl speaking, not Darryl from VanillaSoft. This is just Darryl, the CMO, speaking. I believe marketing is accountable for a variety of things. First and foremost, let's get a little pragmatic. Measure me on my cost per lead. All right, because that's going to help me do, funnel math. If a search engine lead costs X, a webinar lead costs Y, a trade show lead costs, Z. So, that's going to be factored into that cost per lead. Measure me on my cost of acquisition. Measure me on my average lifetime value or average customer value. All right. So those are things there that are huge. As a marketer, here's the interesting phenomena. I've never had a CEO or a CFO come to me and say to you, that's it, you're cut off, no more money, even if you rock, no more money. What they say to me is, show me the return I'm getting for your spend, and if you can show me a positive return, I'll give you more money. Now, it's a high-level statement, right? So part of that is then you're going to get a little more granular into the actual margins, right? So you can have a high cost of acquisition, or you can have a low cost of acquisition. But if the margin isn't sufficient, then that isn't enough, and you got to optimize your processes. But things that a marketer can absolutely control are those things I just talked about there. So what does that mean? Let's look at this a different way. If I have 100 people show up for a webinar or 1,000 people show up for a webinar. Does it matter? Well, that's a vanity metric. So it's nice to say I had 1,000 people show up. How many of those deals actually became customer? And therefore, it was my cost of acquisition. Cost per lead, cost of acquisition. Are you actually acquired? If I acquired, one deal out of 100 registrants, or I acquired one deal out of 1,000, the 100 is a much better ROI. So you're gonna have a lower cost per lead. You're gonna have a lower cost of acquisition. Therefore, that's the first thing. Email, open rates, click-through rates, irrelevant. All right. Interesting vanity plays, interesting numbers for doing some due diligence and some sleuthing to see why are things not performing optimally. But in the end, what matters are results. Where marketing has grown immensely is because of the tech stack, marketing automation, Google, everything else. We can now measure ourselves. Many marketers are scared crapless because they could hide under look at the impressions I've made. Look at the goodwill. Look at the eyeballs you've seen. So what? All right. So that's the big thing. Measuring the revenue, measuring the program success, measuring the contribution. You pick the metrics you want, whether you want to go MRR, ARR, or whatever you want to do. But you've got to be held accountable.
Fantastic. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much, Darryl. And I think maybe we should have one or more of these conversations where we go into certain other aspects of it as well. It looks like you have a lot to share with our audience as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And again, thank you everyone for tuning in. And again, this will be made available soon to you. And stay tuned for our next webinar where we'll be having another mystery guest. Thanks a lot.